Christian Horner finally decides to take Red Bull to court. Who could win? Will Christian Horner ask for compensation? I recommend you stay until the end of the video to find out everything that will happen with Christian Horner's dismissal. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Christian Horner, the once untouchable team principal of Red Bull Racing and a dominant force in the Formula One paddock for nearly 2 decades, has reportedly launched an unprecedented legal offensive against his former employer. According to sources intimately familiar with the unfolding drama, Horner is not just contesting his dismissal, he is preparing for a courtroom battle that could shake the very foundations of Red Bull Racing. The catalyst for this extraordinary legal clash? What Horner characterizes as an unlawful, abrupt, and unjustifiable termination of his long-standing contract. But this is no ordinary dismissal claim. Horner is reportedly seeking a staggering $35 million in compensation, a figure he insists is rightfully his based on the intricate provisions embedded in his employment agreement, a deal forged over years of success, loyalty, and power building within the Red Bull organization. Red Bull Racing, however, appears to be digging in its heels. The team has refused to pay a single cent of the proposed compensation package, arguing vehemently that Horner's dismissal was not only lawful but also fully justified. According to Red Bull's legal stance, the conditions necessary for such a massive payout were simply not met, neither contractually nor ethically. This hardline response has only served to escalate tensions and plunge both parties into a highly volatile legal confrontation, now teetering on the edge of becoming one of the most sensational lawsuits in modern Formula One history. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Horner's legal complaint reportedly includes multiple explosive allegations: breach of contract, wrongful dismissal, reputational damage, and a refusal by Red Bull to provide the financial restitution he believes he is entitled to. Beyond the monetary figure, insiders say Horner is also seeking a public vindication, a declaration that he was unfairly targeted and removed under dubious circumstances that remain shrouded in secrecy. For someone who has spent almost 2 decades at the helm of one of the most successful teams in motorsport history, the sense of betrayal is, according to close confidants, absolutely overwhelming. What makes this unfolding saga even more captivating, and far more dangerous for both parties, is the complete lack of transparency surrounding the events that led to Horner's termination. Neither Red Bull nor Horner has made any substantive public statement explaining the precise nature of the dismissal. The silence is deafening. And that vacuum of information has only intensified speculation, turning the paddock into a cauldron of intrigue, rumor, and unrelenting gossip. Team insiders, rival managers, and media personnel are all scrambling for clues, each trying to piece together the real story behind the sensational headlines. What's especially noteworthy is the growing belief among insiders that Horner's departure had less to do with the team's performance on the track, which, while slightly less dominant in recent races, remains elite, and more to do with deeply personal and potentially controversial internal matters. Several unverified sources have hinted that Horner may have clashed repeatedly with influential figures within Red Bull's upper management. These tensions could have revolved around strategic disagreements, leadership conflicts, or even allegations of conduct that violated the organization's internal code of ethics. Some whisper about power struggles that had been simmering quietly behind the scenes for years, rivalries and unresolved conflicts that finally reached a boiling point. Others suggest that Horner had grown increasingly isolated in recent months, his decisions questioned by senior Red Bull executives who had previously backed him unconditionally. Allegations of breakdowns in trust, potential breaches of internal policies, and escalating interpersonal friction with high-ranking team officials have all emerged, albeit without confirmation. Yet despite the lack of concrete evidence, these rumors have spread like wildfire, captivating fans and igniting endless speculation on social media, in forums, and across news platforms. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. What's clear is that this is no ordinary contract dispute. It is a complex, high-stakes legal battle between a man who helped build Red Bull Racing into a championship-winning dynasty and the very organization that now seeks to erase him from its legacy. Horner is not just fighting for money, he's fighting for his reputation, his legacy, and what many describe as his rightful place in the history of Formula One. Whether this dispute results in a courtroom showdown, a confidential settlement, or a public reckoning that shakes Red Bull to its core, one thing is certain: the story is far from over. In fact, it may only just be beginning. Christian Horner, the embattled former Red Bull Racing team principal, has so far maintained a cautious and restrained public demeanor, offering only minimal commentary on the stunning and abrupt nature of his departure from the organization. However, according to individuals with direct access to Horner's private circle, the reality behind closed doors paints an entirely different picture, one filled with shock, disillusionment, and deep-seated fury. Those closest to him have revealed that Horner feels utterly betrayed, describing his reaction as one of sheer outrage. He reportedly believes that the entire process leading to his ousting was not only unfair but carried out in an underhanded and clandestine manner, orchestrated by high-ranking figures within Red Bull's corporate structure, individuals he once considered allies and collaborators. According to confidential sources, Horner was completely blindsided by the decision. There were no forewarnings, no subtle indications, no professional courtesies extended, just a swift and ruthless dismissal that left him stunned and infuriated. Insiders claim that Horner has privately voiced his belief that this was a calculated move, devised without his knowledge, and executed with a level of secrecy and cold detachment that he never anticipated from a company to which he dedicated years of unwavering commitment. His inner circle describes the manner in which he was removed as nothing short of a betrayal, an act that not only caught him off guard but fundamentally undermined his trust in the institution he helped elevate to the pinnacle of Formula One success. What has made matters worse, according to those familiar with the situation, is the total lack of transparency. Horner allegedly received no formal explanation, no clear outline of the reasons behind his dismissal, and no opportunity to address or counter any supposed allegations. As far as his legal team is concerned, it is entirely possible that no legitimate allegations even exist, further compounding their belief that this was a premeditated and baseless removal. From a legal standpoint, the response from Horner's representatives has been swift, firm, and unambiguous. The legal team representing him has already made public declarations asserting that the termination of Horner's contract was, in their expert opinion, 100% illegal. They maintain that the executive agreement under which Horner operated contained specific clauses and safeguards designed to protect against exactly this kind of arbitrary and procedurally flawed dismissal. According to them, the contract includes stipulations that require formal notice, internal hearings, documented justification, and strict adherence to a due process framework, none of which, they claim, were followed in this instance. Their argument is not just centered around the breach of contract, but also around what they describe as a clear violation of employment law and ethical business practices. In their assessment, Red Bull's decision to terminate Horner's employment not only disregards the contractual obligations enshrined in a legally binding document, but also sets a dangerous precedent regarding the treatment of senior executives in high-profile global organizations. The legal team argues that, given Horner's long-standing contributions, his global reputation, and the weight his name carries within the motorsport community, the handling of his dismissal is both professionally damaging and morally indefensible. It sends a message, intentional or not, that even the most loyal and effective leaders can be cast aside without due process, without explanation, and without accountability from those pulling the strings. As tensions escalate, Horner's legal advisors have already initiated proceedings in the United Kingdom, where his employment was officially registered. Their goal is not only to secure the compensation they argue he is legally entitled to, which could amount to a multi-million-pound payout, but also to ensure that the case sets a strong precedent that prevents similar abuses of executive power in the future. Furthermore, should Red Bull continue to resist fulfilling what Horner's lawyers see as their financial and legal obligations, they are prepared to escalate the matter to international courts. They are ready to pursue this battle across jurisdictions, dragging it into the global spotlight if necessary, and ensuring that every detail is dissected under the full glare of legal scrutiny. Behind the scenes, the situation has grown increasingly tense, with legal teams working around the clock, compiling evidence, securing testimonies, and building a robust legal offensive. There is a growing belief among those close to Horner that this case could have ramifications far beyond a single executive dispute, that it could prompt a re-evaluation of how corporate governance is enforced in the upper echelons of global sport. At the heart of it all lies the assertion that Red Bull not only acted without justification, but also without integrity, and that Christian Horner, a man who helped shape the modern identity of the team, was cast aside like an expendable figure in a power struggle he never saw coming. Whether Red Bull underestimated Horner's willingness to fight or miscalculated the legal muscle he could mobilize remains to be seen. What is clear, however, is that this is no longer just an internal matter. The battle lines have been drawn, the legal arguments are being sharpened, and both sides appear poised for a prolonged and highly public confrontation that could reshape the corporate dynamics of one of the most successful teams in Formula One history. What makes this situation even more shocking and historically significant within the realm of Formula One is the unexpected yet seemingly proactive involvement of the FIA, the sport's top regulatory body. According to high-level sources deeply embedded in the legal and administrative networks of the Paddock, Christian Horner's legal team has already initiated direct communications with the FIA, delivering what has been described as a voluminous dossier, a meticulously compiled and expansive collection of documentation, internal memos, correspondences, and procedural breakdowns, all allegedly reinforcing Horner's claim of wrongful dismissal. These documents reportedly outline not just the timeline and substance of the events leading to his removal, but also implicate broader organizational dynamics within Red Bull that may have contributed to a decision many now see as hasty, politically motivated, or even unethical. Although the FIA has thus far refrained from issuing any public statements, press releases, or official communiques on the matter, well-placed insiders with long-standing connections to senior FIA leadership reveal that there is already a deeply rooted undercurrent of sympathy towards Horner's position. Several prominent officials, some of whom have previously collaborated with Horner on various F1 regulatory committees and strategic planning initiatives, are said to be viewing the abrupt dismissal as not only unjustified, but as a serious threat to the sport's moral and operational foundation. Privately, these senior figures have conveyed what's being described as unofficial but powerful moral backing, with discussions already underway regarding potential paths of intervention, should the situation continue to spiral or reveal significant breaches in ethical conduct or labor policy on Red Bull's part. The FIA, despite its silence on the surface, is allegedly deploying internal teams to gather and assess further intelligence regarding the internal power dynamics at Red Bull. These efforts include confidential interviews, scrutiny of HR processes, and even cross-referencing contractual clauses that may shed light on whether Horner's rights as a senior team principal were adequately protected or, as some fear, systematically undermined. It's becoming increasingly apparent that if Red Bull is found to have contravened either the FIA's ethical charter or international employment best practices, the governing body may step in with investigatory authority, potentially escalating the matter to one of the highest-profile regulatory showdowns in recent F1 memory. Meanwhile, Red Bull Racing's public posture has been one of extreme caution, bordering on a complete media blackout. Inquiries from journalists, analysts, and even shareholders have been met with vague, non-committal replies, couched in corporate terminology that seems more designed to deflect scrutiny than to offer clarity. Their official statements, sparse as they are, merely refer to ongoing internal personnel matters and confidential procedural reviews, avoiding any specific mention of Horner by name or acknowledging the scale of the controversy currently engulfing their F1 operations. This calculated silence has only intensified the sense of unease rippling through the motorsport world. After all, Christian Horner was not just a team principal, he was the architect behind Red Bull Racing's transformation from an upstart team into a dominant force in Formula One. Under his leadership, the team celebrated a golden era that included multiple Constructors' Championships and Drivers' titles, most notably during the reigns of Sebastian Vettel and more recently Max Verstappen. His sudden removal, devoid of any accompanying explanation or justification, feels to many like an act of institutional erasure, erasing a man who helped define the modern identity of Red Bull in F1. For fans, pundits, and insiders alike, the real mystery is no longer just why Horner was let go, but what exactly is being hidden. There is growing speculation that his dismissal may be tied to deeper internal conflicts, potentially involving executive boardroom rivalries, ideological fractures between Red Bull Racing and its Austrian parent company, or even personal vendettas that have festered over years behind the scenes. The utter absence of transparency has sparked a wave of distrust, igniting conspiracy theories and whispered conversations in the paddock, each more dramatic than the last. The sport finds itself at a crossroads. If the FIA's monitoring evolves into a formal investigation, and if Horner's legal campaign gains traction both in court and in the court of public opinion, the fallout could be seismic. Not only could it expose the inner workings of Red Bull's decision-making processes, but it might also provoke broader discussions about the responsibilities F1 teams hold when it comes to leadership accountability, corporate ethics, and the fair treatment of individuals who have contributed immensely to the sport's global success. At this stage, everything remains uncertain, but the stakes couldn't be higher. Formula One, a sport that thrives on spectacle and precision, is now bracing itself for one of the most turbulent and emotionally charged off-track dramas in recent history. The question now is no longer whether the FIA will get involved, but how far they're willing to go to defend the principles they claim to uphold. The lack of any official statement from Red Bull Racing has only served to fan the flames of speculation and intensify the intrigue surrounding Christian Horner's shocking and controversial exit from the team. As each day passes without clarity, the vacuum left by silence is quickly being filled with whispers, leaked fragments, and increasingly wild theories. One of the most persistent and potentially explosive rumors is that Horner's personal conduct may have crossed certain lines behind closed doors, triggering a series of internal alarms that led to his eventual removal. Some suggest that it wasn't a single action but a pattern of behavior, long tolerated by the upper ranks, that finally became untenable as new leadership, new sponsors, and a changing corporate culture began to shift Red Bull's internal expectations. Still, nothing has been officially confirmed or denied by any of the individuals or entities connected to the situation, leaving room for endless interpretation and debate. Behind the scenes, sources with access to senior team members describe a climate of deepening tension and unresolved conflict. Several insiders, speaking anonymously due to non-disclosure agreements and fear of professional retaliation, claim that the roots of this fallout may stretch back several years. According to them, Horner's unwavering and often forceful leadership style began to rub key stakeholders the wrong way as early as 2021. His tendency to centralize control, his reluctance to compromise, and his powerful influence over team culture may have created friction with those who sought a different path forward. Some point to fundamental disagreements with other senior executives, while others mention a widening gap between Horner's personal vision for the team and the evolving philosophies of Red Bull's top-level ownership structure, especially after significant changes in global management following the death of co-founder Dietrich Mateschitz. New voices reportedly rose within the organization, voices that did not see Horner as indispensable, but rather as an increasingly problematic figure in a team aiming to modernize, restructure, and future-proof itself. But while rumors swirl about backroom battles and veiled accusations, a very different narrative is emerging from Horner's camp, one of betrayal, disillusionment, and corporate coldness. Those close to Horner, including past team collaborators, loyal supporters in the motorsport community, and former Red Bull engineers, have voiced their dismay at the manner in which his departure was handled. Many have described his treatment as nothing short of ruthless, particularly given his immense contributions to the organization over the past 2 decades. Under his leadership, Red Bull evolved from a brash newcomer in the Paddock to a multi-time world championship powerhouse. He built the team from the ground up, shaped its identity, handpicked critical talent, and helped turn Max Verstappen into a generational icon. And yet, according to his defenders, when internal politics shifted, the very legacy he had created became a threat to those wanting to steer the ship in a new direction. Some sources even go as far as claiming that Horner was deliberately sidelined, cut off from decision-making circles, and ultimately discarded once his influence began to clash with emerging priorities. From their perspective, the whole saga reeks of calculated maneuvering, a quiet coup rather than a legitimate dismissal. One of Horner's legal representatives recently hinted that the dispute is not primarily about money, compensation packages, or contract clauses. Instead, it's about deeper values, fairness, recognition, and the right to be treated with dignity after years of unrelenting dedication. The attorney described Horner as someone who gave everything, emotionally, physically, and intellectually, to the Red Bull cause, and yet found himself suddenly cast aside, not with a conversation or a transition plan, but with a metaphorical shove out the door. The phrase used, "thrown under the bus," has now become something of a rallying cry among his allies, who believe that the silence from Red Bull isn't just strategic, but potentially an admission of guilt disguised as discretion. Behind closed doors, there is also talk of pending litigation, confidential arbitration, and possibly even damaging revelations if the matter escalates. If Horner chooses to go public with what he knows, about how decisions are made within the team, about the power plays that occur behind the scenes, or about the real dynamics between executives and drivers, the entire organization could find itself under a microscope like never before. Insiders hint that Horner possesses documentation, emails, and messages that could paint a very different picture of what truly transpired in the weeks leading up to his departure. And while Red Bull may hope to weather the storm through silence and strategic distraction, the media frenzy is unlikely to die down soon. The motorsport world thrives on controversy, and when the controversy involves one of the sport's most recognizable and influential figures, every whisper becomes a headline, and every unanswered question becomes a breeding ground for more conjecture. In the absence of facts, narrative becomes reality. Right now, 2 very different stories are being told. One of a leader who finally lost the confidence of his peers due to questionable behavior or outdated tactics, and another of a loyal general betrayed by the very empire he helped build. Which version ultimately prevails, in the court of public opinion, or in actual court, may depend less on evidence and more on who controls the microphone when the next chapter is written. Either way, the silence is not neutral. It is deafening, and it is dangerous. Because in Formula One, Where perception is often as powerful as performance, the truth can be just another weapon in a battle for control, legacy, and survival. As court filings begin to surface and the legal machinery slowly grinds forward, the Christian Horner saga is steadily evolving from a whispered controversy to a headline-grabbing judicial showdown that could send shockwaves through the very core of Formula One. With every new legal document that enters the public domain, anticipation grows, not just among fans and journalists, but within the paddock itself, where silence often speaks louder than words. Each revelation, no matter how small, is analyzed with surgical precision, as insiders and observers alike attempt to piece together a puzzle that seems to stretch far beyond the immediate allegations. Although the full picture remains elusive and wrapped in a shroud of legal confidentiality, the growing tension is undeniable. Behind the scenes, there is a palpable sense that something monumental is brewing. Sources close to the situation suggest that Horner's inner circle is working tirelessly to craft a carefully worded public statement, one that not only defends his reputation but reshapes the narrative in his favor. There are increasing whispers of a potential press conference that could break the media silence and ignite a global media frenzy. And it doesn't stop there. Some insiders are hinting at something even more explosive, a comprehensive, tell-all interview or a high-production documentary that would dive deep into the power struggles, political maneuverings, and personal betrayals that allegedly led to Horner's abrupt dismissal from Red Bull Racing. If such a project were to materialize, it could redefine how controversies in the motorsport world are communicated to the public. This wouldn't be just another scandal aired in the press. It would be a cinematic, emotionally charged recounting of events from the perspective of one of the most influential figures in modern Formula One. Viewers could gain access to never-before-seen footage, confidential communications, and first-hand testimonies that would cast a stark light on the high-stakes world of team leadership at the pinnacle of motorsport. But the ramifications extend far beyond storytelling and public relations. This legal confrontation could become a watershed moment for the governance of elite global sports teams. At stake are not just tens of millions of dollars. Horner is reportedly seeking $35 million in compensation, but the unwritten rules surrounding executive accountability, employment termination, and ethical leadership in an ultra-competitive environment where egos, politics, and profit often collide. Red Bull Racing itself is now caught in the eye of the storm. A team synonymous with dominance, innovation, and an almost mythological internal structure, Red Bull may soon find its most carefully guarded secrets dragged into the unforgiving light of public scrutiny. The legal precedent that emerges from this case could affect not only how team principals and high-ranking executives are hired and fired, but also how teams navigate internal crises, manage reputational risk, and maintain operational stability under intense global pressure. Within the paddock, the mood is tense. Rival teams are watching closely, not only for competitive advantages that might arise from Red Bull's internal turmoil, but also to better understand the shifting dynamics of power in Formula One's executive landscape. Team bosses, driver managers, legal advisors, and even governing bodies are quietly reassessing their own protocols, realizing that what is playing out with Horner today could become their reality tomorrow. And yet, for Christian Horner, this battle appears deeply personal. More than a legal dispute over compensation, this is a fight for legacy, dignity, and the right to tell his side of the story. Allies close to him describe a man who feels betrayed by the very institution he helped build into a motorsport empire. For years, Horner has been the face of Red Bull Racing's dominance, the architect of its championship-winning strategies, and a defining presence in the paddock. Now he stands on the precipice of a reputational cliff, determined not to fall without making the world understand exactly what happened behind the scenes. His willingness to confront the allegations head-on, through legal means, public discourse, and possibly through the lens of a documentary, demonstrates a level of resolve that could either vindicate him entirely or further complicate an already convoluted narrative. This is no longer just about dollars. It's about honor. It's about truth. And above all, it's about control. Control over the story, control over the consequences, and control over what comes next in a sport where every move is watched, recorded, and judged under the brightest of lights. As the days pass and the case inches closer to a courtroom showdown or a negotiated resolution, one thing remains clear: Formula One has rarely seen a drama of this scale unfold off track. The outcome could reshape not just the future of Christian Horner, but the structure, transparency, and ethical compass of the entire sport. Whether this ends in vindication, compromise, or further chaos, the motorsport world will never be quite the same again.